Today we're talking Amendment 1, the May 8th primary, and North Carolina's swing state appeal. I'm Carlton Hargrove, and this is 282. Welcome, folks, to another episode of 282. We're back after a few weeks off, and as usual, we'll be bringing you another great conversation talking about a number of hot local issues. But before we get the conversation started, let's say what's up to producer Jarvis Holiday. What's up, Jarvis? I don't really have a name for your area today.
What?
Sorry,
spring
3 weeks off, man. You know.
You have a nice tan, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
But,
as do you.
Yeah. Well, we're looking forward to engaging with you all on Twitter. You can follow us at 282TV, especially the folks watching the live stream. We have some political and controversial topics, so let's have a no-holds-barred conversation.
It's gonna be some fighting up in the studio. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's gonna be a hot topic. You know, we coming back after this week's off to bring you a really great conversation about some issues that I think everybody is interested in. Let's introduce the panel. Up first, we've got Bruce Carroll, who is a blogger and the founder of the Gay Patriot blog.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us. We've also got Ashley Blue. And I want to make sure I get your title right. You're the Charlotte Regional Field Director for Protect NC Families.
Correct.
Wonderful, wonderful. And we've also got David Swindell, who is, I got your card right here, the Associate Professor and Director at UNC Charlotte for Public Policy Department. Okay, wonderful. Thank you guys for joining us. We're going to jump right into the conversation. We're going to start talking about Amendment 1. Now, as we know, the May 8th primary is coming up, and really the big issue that's kind of been dominating everybody's conversation and stories in the newspaper is Amendment 1. Now, for anybody that doesn't know, Amendment 1, for all intents and purposes, was sort of created, and somebody might disagree with me, but created to ban gay marriage. And if you look at the bill, it actually says that it makes it that marriage between one man and one woman is the only legal domestic union. That's the point of the bill, or point of the amendment, the bill to get the amendment. Now, one thing I would like to kind of talk about is who is for this bill and who is against this bill. And I mean, we could say that personally, but also I want to talk about just groups in the political organizations, civic organization, who's pushing this thing and who is trying to vote against it. Let's start with you, Bruce.
Sure. The generalization to answer your question is that most religious organizations, especially the Catholic Church, Mormon Church in other states, has traditionally been against gay marriage. I personally believe, with my Christian belief, that a marriage is between a man, woman, and God. It's a covenant.
Okay.
So I'm fine with civil unions. I'm fine with domestic partners. I have a domestic partner.
Okay.
But I think it really does come down to a religious objection based on historical traditions and practices of churches today.
Okay. Well, let's go around and just kind of get everybody to chime in. Ashley?
Well, from our position, there seem to be more people against it than there are for it.
Okay.
And that's the good news. Piggybacking off of what Bruce just said, we have a number of religious organizations that have come out staunchly against the amendment. We find that to be energizing a lot of people. With Protect NC Families, especially in Charlotte, we've put a massive focus on making sure that we're targeting the faith community, having conversations, and talking about this amendment openly. And we've come to the consensus that it's just harmful. We don't like to put the tag on it that it's the gay marriage amendment because the language is so broad that it's going to end up affecting unmarried families across the state.
Okay.
So the statistics we give it's only going to be about 12% of our population, which is the gay population of North Carolina, that will be affected by it. The rest of that is unmarried families across the state. And we just want to encourage people to vote against it because we don't want to see ourselves in that vulnerable position, especially at such hard economic times right now. It's just a step back.
Well, and we're going to delve into the ramifications in a second, but David, I want to get you to kind of chime in on, where you stand on it and where, what groups are for it and against it that you are, encounter.
Personally, my position on this is I do personally oppose it, but I oppose it on grounds of civil rights. It's more of a civil rights issue, in my opinion. I try to stay out of the religious debate with regards to my work at the university, obviously. But I do find that a lot of the support that's coming from it is not just from conservatives. There are a lot of liberals that support that as well. But at the same time, there's a lot of conservatives that oppose it on the grounds that you are targeting a specific population, or you're having the effect of targeting a specific population with a constitutional amendment.
Right.
And that's not what the Constitution of the state's supposed to be about.
Right. Well, it's interesting you bring that up, Republican or conservative groups that are against it. I know the John Locke Foundation has come out against it, and which is, the John Locke is against it. My God.
Yeah.
It must be terrible. No, but what are the ramifications that you see? Obviously, there's some ramifications for gay, citizens of the state. But what are the ramifications for people who are of all different, gender, whatever?
Well, Ashley's probably the better one to
I'm
start
sorry.
with that.
Yeah, you might
go to
be right.
Ashley then.
I do that for a living. Well, just telling you guys the simple glossing over. There's a couple of things that will impact people. Unmarried families are the biggest bracket of people that are going to be harmed. The example that I like to give that's very personal is as myself. My mom and my dad were not married, but they worked together to make sure that, I was raised properly and I was on my father's health insurance. So let's say this bill goes into place and this amendment is put into our state constitution. That would make it a little bit more difficult for me to be on my father's health care. He would then have to prove I'm his child, go through some legal proceedings that would, normally not be the way to go. And we just see that as a blockade to a lot of things that families have on the table. There's issues that they're dealing with every night, and legal proceedings are the last thing you want to deal with. So it's just going to make it a little bit more difficult in that realm. Other situations, there are implications that people don't think about, like seniors is one of the more difficult things to explain, because we have looked at our research, and there are some situations where seniors will be forced to get married. Again, either if they're widowed or widowers, or they simply have been divorced and they're just not in a legal union anymore. They might lose their benefits if they don't enter back into some type of domestic legal union. And that's a situation where, you don't want to put somebody in that position where they need to get married.
Right, right. Yeah.
That's taking away the sanctity of marriage as well. So we try to let people know about those things because they fly under the radar so often.
Well, obviously we're discussing this bill, right? And this proposed amendment. And it just doesn't sound good at all. And I'm wondering, for people who are for it and groups who are for it, what is the argument being made for it?
Well, I'll chime in here now.
All right, Bruce.
And I know John Hood from the John Locke Foundation. We're friends, and I respect his opinion. You can argue about public policy all day and have a constructive dialogue like this and just come out of it with a different opinion. I would say that my personal view on this is that the tradition of marriage and the male-female unit is so fundamental to society that we just shouldn't be tampering this. Now, in full disclosure, I'm gay, I have a partner, I am conservative, and, I've really wrestled with this issue for a number of years. I grew up in the 80s and 90s when I was coming of age in the age of AIDS, and marriage was never on the plate. I mean, this kind of became a civil right after Bill Clinton signed the Defense of Marriage Act. So, I'm a little bit confused of how this suddenly became such an issue when this wasn't the issue the gay community was talking about 15 or 20 years ago.
Okay.
That's what's problematic to me, is that it seems to have come out of nowhere.
Well, I'm sure there are some viewers sitting at home, some who are gay, some who are straight, and they have a problem with a lot of what you're saying.
Sure.
Because, you would think if you are gay that you would push to have be included as much in civil rights and whatever civil interactions as humanly possible. But to say I'm actually for something that would limit me, a lot of people would be kind of confused by that.
Well, I understand that.
Okay.
But my perspective is that there are some things that are bigger than my own self-interest.
Okay.
The foundation of society, the religious liberty protected in the First Amendment. These things are bigger than Bruce, and that's important to me.
Okay. Well, let's get to Jarvis. I think he's got some Twitter comments from our folks out there. What's up, Jarvis?
Yes, we have some tweets from our followers. We asked, if folks think the Amendment 1 will pass on the May 8th ballot. At Donna CLT says, I hope Amendment 1 doesn't pass, but I fear it will. There are way too many people willing to legislate according to the Bible. Great friend of the show, at Orange Chuck, says, sadly, it might and will set the state back 100 years and make me ashamed to live here. Pound equal rights for all. Interestingly enough, most folks are tweeting using the hashtag pound amendment 1, the number 1, and it's overwhelmingly against the passage. I mean, I'm scrolling down through hundreds of tweets and can hardly find anyone in favor. Maybe social media is just more liberal or more against those things. But taking one more, at Miss Laura Kittle says, defeating Amendment 1 isn't just about same-sex marriage equality. It affects all of us who are unmarried.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jarvis. Thank you, Twitter folks out there. David, I want to ask you, kind of piggybacking off some stuff they're saying, do you think that this, I mean, I don't want to play, psychic, but do you think that this will be voted down or what? What are your personal feelings about it?
The polling suggests that it's probably going to pass, but it's the gap is narrowing.
Okay.
It has been narrowing for the last couple of months. I think that I suspect that it will still pass, but it's going to be a lot closer than we thought. In some counties, it will probably be defeated, but overall statewide, because of the rural population, there's a much more conservative element in the rural parts of the state. I think that will probably carry it to passage.
Now, do you think Charlotte will be overwhelmingly against it?
I don't know about overwhelmingly.
Okay.
I suspect it will probably be defeated in Charlotte-Mecklenburg.
Okay.
Certainly the city of Charlotte, maybe even the county.
Okay.
But yeah, it's going to be close.
That's interesting. How much do you think that ties into just this area's move toward a more democratic, a body of voters?
Well, it's interesting. A lot of the we have a larger African American population in the city of Charlotte, and this is one of those issues that's not monolithic within the African American community. There is a large portion that are socially conservative and do find that that marriage should be defined as a marriage, as a union of a man and a woman. But it's not all of them, and so it's not something that you could just guarantee that the black vote is going to be against this or for it as a civil rights issue.
Yeah.
That's been a little surprising in the polling. People thought that they would be all against it, just because it's as a civil rights issue, but that's not the case. So I think that you will see a split in that demographic here within the city, but I do think the city overall does tend to lean a little bit more left than the county as a whole, and certainly farther left than the state as a whole.
I think that's it. Ashley, I want to kind of get you to chime in on that. Obviously we're both African American, and
I think so.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I think I have read some stories that try to point to the fact that African American church-going folks are totally against this, and that's just not true all the way. And what are your thoughts on this?
Well, it's interesting. In my church, I go to church off of Tuckasegee, West Side Charlotte, Mount Carmel, and it's interesting. There's a good bracket of people who are for the amendment based off of tenets in the Bible, which I can respect. But we like to share with people that it's not about gay marriage. It's perfectly fine to be against this amendment and still be against gay marriage. There are 2 statutes in North Carolina law already that outlaw gay marriage. So whether this thing passes or fails, gay people are not going to be able to go get married on May 9th. It's just not going to happen. And the fact that we are such a southern state, I don't know if it will ever happen. But what we can do is make sure that we don't legislate discrimination. One of my personal tasks was just to make sure that I went straight to the African American community of Charlotte first and gauge their response. Of those who did not know about the amendment, once you educate someone about how it's going to harm them, especially that 80% African American bracket of unmarried families that will be directly affected by this amendment if it passes, they're more apt to vote against it. And that's been our thing. If we educate people about what it says, it's been helpful. And we know that the National Organization for Marriage had internal documents leaked that clearly said they wanted to pit the gay community and the African American community against each other in 2012 and try and break that voting block for President Obama. And, our thing is we're smarter than that, especially here in North Carolina. We're a more progressive state. And there's plenty of Republicans, there's plenty of conservatives who we've talked to that are not going to vote for this amendment strictly off of the discrimination. So I think that's where we're headed in North Carolina.
I think she raises a really interesting point when it goes back to the John Locke Foundation and some of the conservatives who are opposing this, is the language that's actually used in the amendment is so broad, much more so than other states that have passed similar marriage amendments, in that it's not just about marriage, it's about domestic partnerships more broadly. And the effects that it will have on unmarried individuals is far more disconcerting. And I think that's why we've seen the polls close a little bit, is as the awareness of the breadth of the language, I think that's what's scaring some people into opposing this, even though I think it would have been much more a slam dunk case had they just defined it as marriage specifically and not gotten into the domestic partnerships and the effects it would have had on potentially unmarried couples.
Yeah,
I'll agree with that.
I would agree as well. I mean, I'm not a resident of North Carolina anymore as of a few months ago, but clearly the broadness of the language is much more troublesome than we've seen in other states. You know, I'm not voting on May 8th, but I understand why the John Locke Foundation, for example, is concerned about it from a business climate perspective.
Okay.
Oh yeah, that's a whole nother issue.
Right.
The business
That
climate.
is a
I
whole
wish we had
different
time to really delve into that. That was actually my next thing, but we've talked a lot about that. I want to move on to some other subjects. Speaking of the May 8th primary, there are a lot of other things going on the ballot and lots of people running. And I wanted to kind of know from you guys, I just want to go around and let us know if there are any kind of hotly contested races going on, anything we should be made aware of that you think folks should kind of pay attention to. I'll start with you.
Okay. The House race for Sue Myrick's seat in District 9 is, I think, going to be very interesting. You've got a bunch of Republicans, I think 9, maybe 10, that are running in the primary. And so I suspect that none of them will get a majority and we'll have a runoff come July. And that's, of course, where the real fun will begin.
Right. What about the Democrats running? Aren't there like still just like Jennifer? Or?
Jennifer Roberts is the only one.
Only
she does
one
not
running for
have
that one.
Yeah, she doesn't have a primary, so she's good for November.
Okay.
Yeah, she's gearing up for that, I'm sure.
Okay.
But yeah, the excitement will be in the Republican primary, and to see who comes out as the two that will run off in July.
Okay, Ashley, are you thinking in that race, is it going to be Jim Pendergraft that kind of comes out more on top, even despite maybe there being a runoff?
That's an interesting question. I tend to lean more as a fan of Jennifer Roberts, strictly because she's cool.
You saying Jim Pendergraft is not cool?
No. I'll tell him that as well. But Jennifer Roberts is cool. She was one of the first people to come out against the amendment in Charlotte. She attended one of our rallies at Johnson and Wells. So we're still going to pull for her. But that race is unprecedented right now. If you look at the data that's coming back, early voting just started about a week and a half ago. And so far, the turnout in that district alone has blown everyone else out of the water across the state. So it's hot. It's a hot race.
Now,
It'll be interesting to see what happens, though, in the runoff, which will be in July, which is a terrible time for a runoff.
Horrible time.
That's where I think it's going to be very interesting, is depending on who the top two are, and Pendergraft probably is going to be one of them. But given how low the projected turnout for that runoff will be, there is no predicting how that's going to turn out.
Yeah.
Well, this time around, I'm assuming that Amendment 1 kind of helps people get to the polls in the first place, right?
It does. And one of the things that was, initially we thought that the gubernatorial race in the Democratic end would probably push more people, but people don't seem to be as thrilled about that. So we see the turnout right now is mostly just for Amendment 1 and District 9's race. So those are the two things people seem to be weighing very heavily. But, you still have a pretty serious race between Walter Dalton and we got Bob Etheridge on the ticket and Bill Faison. So, there's still some choices to make.
Okay.
It will be interesting to see. One of the things that Governor Perdue said when she did step out of the race and decided not to run for re-election was that she expected that that there would be a runoff for the Democratic nominee, and that would boost turnout, which would be good for opposition to Amendment 1.
Oh, cool. Okay. Bruce, I'm going to get you in. Do you know of any races or anything going on the ballot that people should pay attention to?
Sure, I would agree. The Sue Myrick race is interesting. I did live in her district until last fall. Actually, I liked her. She was very strong on national defense, on spending issues. So I would expect that the Republican nominee, whoever that is, will probably win based on the history there.
Will it be somebody kind of closer in thought to her, you think, or is it going to be?
Yeah, most likely.
Okay.
It just, you just have to look at how the district was mapped. It's much more conservative than it even was when I lived there.
More so than just in 2009.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
The interesting thing there is I was joking with my partner that everyone that ever represented us seems to be running on the ballot for that seat.
Oh, wow, okay.
For state rep, for council, and, Jim Pendergraft and sheriff. I get amused by Robert Pittenger because he seems to run for everything. And I want to know where his money is coming from because he has TV ads, it seems like, all the time.
Right.
My gut is Pendergraft probably has the inside track just from his presence in county and federal government for so long.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on and kind of talk about the third topic, which is the swing state appeal of North Carolina. As we know, in the last presidential election, Barack Obama kind of narrowly took North Carolina for the first time since '76. And, everybody now is like, this is the battleground state. Once again, a lot of different groups are moving in. The Republicans and Democrats are expanding their offices here. The Hip Hop Caucus moved in and put some leadership folks here in Raleigh. Also, there was recently a conservative blogging convention. Did you attend?
Yes.
That was here. And was there any crazy parties or anything? We'll get to that
As
later.
crazy as conservatives.
Okay, all right. Really crazy. So here's the question. What are kind of things looking like on the road to the election? I mean, how are things shaping up to kind of prepare, folks for this battle that's taking place? I'll start with you, Bruce.
Sure. I was at the Conservative Bloggers Convention. First of all, everyone loved Charlotte.
Okay,
There were a lot of folks from around the country. I think we had 200, 250 individuals. Everyone realized that North Carolina is a big deal. Obviously, the convention is here.
Right.
Obviously, the redistricting and the makeup of the congressional delegation is probably going to change in the Republicans' benefit. That may have some effect on the outcome in the presidential race. I think most of my colleagues would find it hard to believe that Obama would win again in North Carolina in 2012. If he does, he probably has won re-election. My guess is on election night, look at Virginia and North Carolina, and if both go to Obama, it's probably time to go to bed early. But yeah, our city has really grown up as a political capital of the South, if not the eastern half of the United States, and I think it's great.
Ashley, how much will straight party voting have an effect on the upcoming election?
Straight party voting is probably the best thing that's ever happened to the Democratic Party. And that's just the honest to God truth. It's one click and that's everybody that you need. But what I can say about the election for 2012, we've got a good amount of momentum rolling in Charlotte. Charlotte is the eye of the storm, as we like to call it, for North Carolina politics. If you can get Mecklenburg County, kind of swirls around and you just go right on up 85 and bring it around 74. So it's looking really good. It's going to be tight as well. I mean, that was 14,000 votes that it came down to in 2008, and it's going to be a tight one again. But what you can do is look at the grassroots efforts, especially in Charlotte, coming off of the Fox campaign. We started the momentum there for the president, and the people are energized. So we're just going to carry that all the way through to November, and it looks like we're in shape.
Okay. And how much is McCrory's race run for the governor's house? How much is that going to play into the straight party voting? I mean, is it going to be some people that kind of thrown off by that? Or
people
what?
love Pat McCrory. I mean,
who? No,
people in general.
Some people.
Somebody loves Pat McCrory somewhere. No, Pat McCrory. He.
This guy.
I don't have too much of a beef with Pat McCrory. He didn't put too much of an emphasis on the black community in Charlotte, which is like my only thing with him.
Right.
But he kept the city afloat for a very long time. Mayor Fox is obviously the champion of holding down Charlotte. So thumbs up to Tony for his birthday today. But yeah, I think it's looking good. But he's been very quiet in the background, getting ready for November.
Watch him when he's
quiet. that Pat
Plotting
man.
some-
Yeah.
Well, one thing to keep in mind is that on the general election in November, straight party tickets, that's the president is separate from the president. From the
Oh, okay,
party
okay.
ticket.
Right,
So
right,
there is
okay.
a
Cool.
difference to keep in mind on that.
Thank you for see that's what we got to educate it.
Notes.
Educated. Well, I like to get you guys to kind of play psychic. What do you think North Carolina is either gonna go Obama, is gonna go to whoever?
I
Newt.
think in my, it's awfully early still on that race, but I suspect, barring any big change in the economy, if we stay on the same trajectory, I think he will not win North Carolina, but he'll make a heck of a race out of it.
Okay.
And that's really the important thing because it will force Romney to have to spend to win it.
Okay.
I'm working for OFA, so if I'm down.
We take
for
that
the
into
cause.
consideration.
Yeah. So, I wouldn't take a job if I thought I was going to lose. I'm 4 for 4 on campaigns right now. Next week will prove. I think we got a good chance here in North Carolina. It really comes down to the grassroots efforts. And, I don't know what Mitt Romney's presence will be. I haven't seen too much momentum from him at all in North Carolina. I think one mistake the Republicans make with North Carolina is taking the state for granted. Mm-hmm. And if you don't establish a presence in North Carolina at the top of the year and keep it moving, then you're going to have a hell of a fight on your hands. And I think that's just our word to the wise.
Okay, Bruce?
I agree. I think it's going to be tight. I think the grassroots effort's taken a little bit of a hit with some of the scandals coming out of the Democratic Party executive offices in Raleigh, but I do think that Obama will probably lose North Carolina, assuming Romney is the nominee.
Yeah, it might be Ron Paul.
I hope
That would be shocking.
Just joking. Okay, so this is the lightning round. We're going to wrap things up. I want to get you guys to tell us what is your most underreported story, I guess in the last week or so. I'll start with you.
I think that we haven't given a whole lot of attention to what's going on at the State House with regards to the budget for the coming year. That has a huge impact on the funding for local services, particularly in higher education, something that's near and dear to my heart. But it represents a big disinvestment for economic development that's provided through higher education.
All right.
Take a story.
Ashley?
My underrated story goes back to Amendment 1. This week we had some ads drop on behalf of the NAACP. They decided to go and put out some placements that let people know about the harms of the amendment and how it's going to affect the Black community. And Reverend Barber, the state president of the NAACP, did those ads himself, and he's been behind us all along. So we want to give him a big shout out. And Kojo Nantumbo here in Charlotte has also been a big force. So we want to show love to the NAACP for getting awareness out.
Bruce?
My underreported story is somewhat related to Amendment 1. A major gay activist, Dan Savage, bullied a bunch of Christian students at a journalism conference a couple weeks ago. The video was leaked last week, and over the weekend, Twitter exploded in a backlash against Dan Savage. And it's very frustrating as a gay conservative to be labeled a self-loathing, bigoted person myself. So I sympathize with those that are on the other end of Dan Savage, and I wish that he would apologize for what he did.
Okay, all right. I like Dan Savage. I'll read him in the paper in Creative Loafing tomorrow. All right, folks. Well, anyway, that's the show. Thank you guys for joining us. It was a great show. We got a great conversation. Come back next week, folks. We'll have another great conversation for you. And look us up online. What's the website again for us?
WTVI.org/282.
WTVI. It'll be on the bottom of the screen. Check out the site. Check us out next week. All right, folks. Thank you.